In today's form drawing, we're going to look at the 4 lines that we did in exercise 47 and use those to create one big form. So we start off by creating a loop that goes down, a loop that rises, and then a loop that comes down. And then we curve around, come in and intersect, and then we come back out and meet up with our line where we started it. The next thing we want to do is we want to use the line that was green in the video 47. So here we're coming down with our loop and then rising to intersect, down to create a loop, rising to intersect, down with our loop, and here we're rising out the form, curving round, and then we're creating a loop, rising to intersect, coming down, creating a loop, rising to intersect, coming down, creating a loop, rising to intersect, coming down, creating a loop, and then we're rising back out to form and curving round to meet our line. Then the next thing to do is use the third line that we created in the last video, which was the blue line. And that's the line where we start again at the side. We come down to create our loop, rise to intersect, down to create our loop, rising to intersect, down to create our loop, rising to intersect, down to create our loop, rising to intersect, down to create our loop, and then we're rising, coming back down and creating a loop, and then rising to intersect, down to create our loop, rising to intersect, down to create our loop, rising and intersecting, down to create our loop, rising and intersecting, down to create our loop, rising and intersecting, and finally down to create our loop before we're rising, and then back round to meet our line where we started it. So now we're at the 4th and final line, and here, as you may remember, we just rise to start with. So here we're rising and then intersecting, and then we come down to create our loop, and then rising to intersect, down to create our loop, 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 and rising to intersect before we curve around and intersect, 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 and curve around and meet our line where we started it. So here is where we started, and here is where we start, and here is where we start, and here is where we start. So this is the first line we start, then we start our second line here, our third line here, and our 4th and final line down here. Now, as you can see, this could be really, really neat. So it's really about how steep are your sections in between. So you could, in between your loops, so you could create a loop and then you could have a section like this, and it all looks quite neat. Looks good? Yes. However, if I create one set of lines like this, but my next set of lines are maybe further apart, like this, then the lines are not going to line up, so to speak. So as you can see here, they kind of line up. But then I have a line here. Here, my loop has actually come too far over to the side. It's not sitting enough in the middle. And that means that this line, for instance, is moved. So then that becomes not, there's a sort of a kink in the line that should be sort of going straight down like that in order to be really neat. So watch out for that. You know, how steep or what's the distance between my loops? Are they at an equal distance? Are my loops sitting neatly in between and where they should be sitting? You know, is my loop sitting right underneath each other? If they're sitting underneath each other, then chances are that, you know, you have a good kind of line. But if they're not, then you start having the lines that sort of move in funny directions. I hope that's a little bit of inspiration for you and help so that you can work with this yourself. You may think this was really easy, in which case I have a bonus video for you that you can check out now.